Chapter 3. The sunlight streamed in through the open window, the curtains flowing in the soft wind. Michael groaned as he silenced his alarm's incessant buzzing. He rolled onto his other side and glanced at Teddy, whose eyes stared back. Michael smiled at him. "Thanks, Teddy." Michael rolled out of bed and stretched, trying to remember whether or not he had had any nightmares the night before. He recalled the firefly, the claw, and the yellow eyes. He vaguely remembered hearing himself scream, but the dreams didn't feel particularly scary now that Michael was fully awake. To his recollection, he felt much safer once he had Teddy. Michael turned back around to Teddy. "Really, I mean it. Thanks, Teddy." He walked over to his closet and changed from his blue pajamas into a striped t-shirt and blue shorts. Then, he walked into the hallway that led to all the rooms in the house, and strolled toward the kitchen, following the smell of toast and the sound of rock music playing on the radio. Dad was standing by the stove, scooping scrambled eggs from a skillet and onto a glass plate. He glanced over his shoulder and smiled at Michael. "You're just in time. Good morning." Michael sat next to Thomas at the round wooden table. "Thanks. Morning." Thomas swallowed his bite of toast. "How'd you sleep?" Michael hesitated, the dreams flashing in his mind as he gazed down at the table. "I slept good, after a while." As Dad set a plate of food in front of him, Michael looked up. "I had a couple really vivid dreams, though." Dad and Thomas both froze. After a moment of silence, Thomas asked, "Were they good dreams?" Michael looked at Thomas and shook his head. "Not really, but they weren't really bad either. I think I'm okay, though." Dad, who was still standing beside Michael, asked, "Are you sure?" Michael turned his head to Dad, nodding emphatically. "Yeah, I think I'm fine." He thought, I hope I'm fine." Jenna held her open hand out the window, feeling the air crash against her palm. The trees appeared to fly by at an incredible speed, and the air smelled of fresh rain. Fritz, who was sitting next to Jenna, asked, "What are we gonna do first?" Jenna turned her attention to Fritz. "I wanted to go swimming first." She shrugged. "But I don't really care. What do you want to do first?" Fritz shrugged. "Whatever will make you happy, because I love you." Jenna's smile widened. "I love you too." Anthony stood at the entrance to the towering Carter's hardware store. To his left, a multitude of glass shards littered the pavement, the remnants of the massive window protruding from the frame like a jagged mountain range. Anthony asked, "And you don't know who they were?" Austin Clarence, the store owner who stood a foot away from Anthony, shrugged. "No, I have no clue who they were." Anthony scribbled in his small notebook, then turned his glance back to Austin. "Do you know of anyone who would want to do harm to your business? Maybe a rival company?" Austin held up his hands. "Not as far as I know." He froze, then slid his hands into the pockets of his purple work uniform. "Well, there's another hardware store on the block, but I wasn't under the impression that we were enemies." "If you're getting more business, then that could be enough." "Well, they're getting more business." Anthony shrugged. "Well, they could have just been random people wanting to break windows. No real reason, they just think it's fun." "Well, I have no clue who they were." Thomas's room was slightly larger than Michael's, and had the same blue tint to it. Michael fumbled with his joystick. "No!" Thomas chuckled. "Stop hiding in the corners. On the television screen, red words appeared that read, "Player 1 wins." Michael set his controller on his lap. Dang it! Thomas set his controller on his lap. 2 out of 3? Michael leaned against the foot of Thomas's bed that was padded by a pillow. Nah, I want to play something else. He shrugged. Unless you don't want to, I mean. Thomas stood. Sure, let's play something else. He started toward the console. By the way, I've been meaning to ask you. He dropped to his knees and removed the cartridge from the console. Do you want to talk about your dream? Michael froze, the sound of the slamming claw reverberating in his fragile mind. He shook his head. No. Thomas scooped up a pile of cartridges and stood up. You're sure? I mean, it seems like it's troubling you. Michael shook his head. No, I'm fine. Thanks for asking, though. Thomas got down on one knee and splayed the cartridges in front of him. Well, if you ever want to talk about it, he shrugged. Or if you want to come crash in my room in the middle of the night, you can. Michael nodded with a smile. Thanks. He glanced at the cartridges, his eyes darting from one to another as he pondered. Then he tapped one of them. That one. Thomas nodded. All right. As Thomas grabbed the cartridge, Michael decided to change the subject. Do you know what courses you're going to start with? Thomas stood up, shaking his head. No, but I think I want to major in electronics. Michael smiled. That's cool. Thomas had always been fascinated with electronics, even when he was little. Whenever Dad was working on an animatronic, Thomas would insist he help wire it. Michael always wanted to help too, until... Michael blinked, trying to push away the sudden recollection of the blood-soaked electronic circuits that were visible beneath the shredded, rotting flesh of the nightmarish creatures. As the television set blared music, Thomas strolled back to Michael. What about you? What do you want to major in when you go to college? Michael shrugged. I don't really know. Thomas chuckled. Well, it's not like you're in any hurry to decide. Take your time. As Thomas sat down, Michael added, I mean, I really like astronomy. It amazes me. He turned to face Thomas. Did you know some people think that we could open up a portal to another universe if we use enough energy? Or that black holes could possibly lead to other universes? He shrugged, chuckling. I think it's a bit far-fetched. Thomas laughed, shrugging. I mean, who knows? With a wicked smile, he pressed a button on his controller. I'll let you have the first shot. Michael smiled as he picked up his controller. You'll regret doing that. Fritz erupted from the rushing water, droplets scattering in all directions as he aimed a squirt gun at Jenna. As he pulled the trigger, Jenna closed one eye and threw her hands out to block the stream. You jerk! With one hand, she splashed Fritz, who quickly dove back into the water. Jenna kept an eye on his distorted image as he swam slightly closer to her. When Fritz emerged, Jenna splashed ferociously, drops cascading against Fritz in a fierce torrent. Fritz! Jenna! They both turned to see Alice standing by the edge of the river and holding up 2 towels. She raised her voice to be heard over the cascading river. Come on out! Fritz whined. Just a few more minutes. Alice pressed one of the towels to her waist and pointed behind Fritz and Jenna. They turned to see a gorgeous sunset, the orange rays splaying in all directions, light seeping through the rustling leaves of the tall trees. Alice spoke. It's almost dark. Come on. Jenna turned back to Alice and nodded. Okay. Fritz sighed irritably. Fine. Fritz, Jenna, and Alice were circled around the fire. Crickets sang, owls hooted, and leaves rustled in the soft wind. Alice leaned back in her folding chair. So, what do you two want to do tomorrow? Fritz, who was holding his open hands over the crackling fire, looked up at his mother. I want to go play in the river again. Jenna chuckled. Yeah. She looked back at the river that serpentined in both directions infinitely, shimmering in the flickering orange light of the campfire. Fritz exclaimed, and tomorrow there'll be another Fredbear. Freddy's was Fritz's favorite place, and his favorite television show was Fredbear and Friends, which was based on Freddy's. Jenna didn't particularly enjoy the show, but hearing Fritz's laugh made it worth sitting through. Fritz continued, I can't wait to see the glowing ones again. He tilted his head at Alice. Why do they glow, Mommy? Alice smiled as she shrugged. I don't know. I guess they're just magical. Fritz beamed. Whoa, magical. Alice glanced at her watch, then back at her children. Well, it's late. We should get in bed. Fritz sighed in disgust. Alright. After they told each other goodnight, and Alice put out the fire, they each went in their own tents. Jenna and Fritz in one tent, and Alice in the one standing next to it. When Anthony had first moved to Hurricane, it took him a while to get used to how much smaller the police station was, compared to the one in Phoenix. It was also weird to see it surrounded by trees and grass, instead of concrete and metal. Anthony sat at his cubicle, going over the notes he had taken the day before, when he heard a voice behind him. Anthony? Anthony turned around in his chair to see Paul Sienter, a member of the forensics team, standing behind him. Anthony smiled. Hey Paul, what's up? Paul replied, I analyzed the footage, but I wasn't able to identify any of the suspects. They must have known the camera was there, and how it was focused, because they were in just the right spot to be blurry. I did notice that they were wearing gloves, though. Anthony placed his hands on his lap. So, they must have been employees of the store then? Paul shrugged. Or they knew an employee who knew how the cameras were focused. And I dusted for prints. He shook his head. Nothing. And I wasn't surprised, considering that they were wearing gloves. Anthony leaned back in his creaky seat. So, they also knew what they were doing, he thought aloud. But why would they do that? Usually people aren't that careful to conceal their prints even when they intend to murder someone. What could they possibly hope to achieve by just breaking the window? If they're employees, maybe they're just upset about something? Paul shrugged again. I have no idea. He grinned. But it's not really my problem, is it? Anthony chuckled, shaking his head. No, I guess it's not. In the far back of the dimly lit, redwood-styled room, Chief Margin burst out of his office, his eyes wide and jaw dropped. The other officers in the station flinched and turned to him, dropping whatever conversations or paperwork they were in the middle of. Anthony's hair stood on end as Margin called, Anthony? Anthony? Nervously, Anthony stood. Yes, sir? Margin stabbed a finger at Anthony. We have a situation. Michael jumped awake, trying to grasp the fragments of the dream he had just had. All he could remember were the two glowing lights circling around each other, then a metallic crash. What made me jump awake? What scared me? Maybe the crash just startled me? He glanced at Teddy. Do you remember? Teddy only stared back. Michael decided that if he couldn't remember, then he didn't care. He glanced at his clock to see that it was 5 minutes until 6 in the morning. He yawned and stretched. I guess I'll get up. After disabling the alarm, he changed into his typical striped t-shirt and blue shorts, and headed toward the kitchen. Surprisingly, no one was there. Are they sleeping in? Michael didn't think that they had already eaten breakfast before he woke up, because in those instances, there would be a plate of food waiting for him on the table. The table was empty. Michael walked over to the stove, thinking about what he should make for himself, until he heard the phone ring. If it was Dad's work, he would want Michael to wake him up. Michael took the red phone off the hook next to the stove and placed the receiver to his mouth. Hello? A girl's voice came from the phone. She sounded like she was about to cry. Michael, it's Jenna. Something happened to Fritz. With a metallic slam, Michael jumped awake. He jerked his head around, frantically darting his eyes at his surroundings. What? It was just a dream. He had dreams about waking up before, but none like that. It was so vivid, so real. He was so positive that he was actually awake. But you always think you're awake when you're dreaming. That's how it works. Michael turned his attention to his alarm clock and stared in shock as his hair stood on end. It was 5 minutes to 6. He blinked, then pinched himself. The clock didn't change. Certain that he was truly awake, he glanced at Teddy. That was weird. Slowly, carefully monitoring every detail, Michael changed his clothes and strolled into the kitchen. Half expecting the kitchen to be empty, he almost sighed in relief to see Dad, who was at the stove and stirring a pot of boiling water. He turned to Michael with a smile. Good morning, Michael. Michael smiled back as he sat down at the table. Morning. He glanced around for a moment, then looked back at Dad. Is Thomas up yet? Dad shrugged. If he is, he hasn't left his room yet. Michael chuckled. How'd you sleep? Dad replied, I slept well. How did you sleep? Michael nodded. I slept pretty good. Did you have another vivid dream? Michael frowned, replaying the dream in his mind, then opening his mouth to speak. Then, his hair stood on end as the phone rang. A chill ran down Michael's spine as Dad answered it. Hello? After a moment, he handed it to Michael. It's Jenna. A jolt shot through Michael's body, and he stared at the phone with widened eyes. Dad smiled-eyed. Is everything okay? Michael blinked and looked up at Dad with a smile. Yeah, it's just... He shook his head quickly. I'll tell you later. He grabbed the phone. Thanks. He placed the phone to his ear. Hi, Jenna. Michael's blood ran cold when he heard Jenna's distressed voice. Michael, it's Fritz. Several police officers were at the campground, scanning the tree line and calling, Fritz! Fritz Lexton! A few other officers started off in a variety of directions. Anthony, who stood next to Alice by the charcoal-littered fireplace, asked, You don't know where he could have gone? Is there anything he said he was excited to do, or anything? Alice, with tears in her eyes, spoke urgently. He said he wanted to play in the river. That was the first place I checked. Could he have been swept away by the river? Alice shook her head emphatically. No! It's not moving that fast, Anthony. She pointed at the river. Go look at it. Anthony pointed to the river. Not too far downstream, it does flow that fast. No, he wouldn't just walk away from the campsite. Anthony stared for a moment. You and I both know that he has a bad tendency of wandering. Anthony whirled at the sound of another squad car pulling up to the campground, crunching leaves and sticks beneath its tires. Jaden, one of Anthony's previous partners, stepped out of the vehicle. He walked over to the passenger door and opened it, grabbing Bane's leash as he hopped out of the seat. Jaden scratched behind Bane's black ear, who folded down his ears and wagged his tail. Jaden walked over to Anthony and Alice, Bane following close behind. Jaden offered, You have anything of Fritz's? Alice dashed into her tent and emerged with a dirty white towel and swimming shorts. Fritz used these yesterday. Are they good enough? Jaden took the towel and shorts from Alice. "We'll see." He fell to one knee and held the items out to Bane as he unhooked his leash. Bane tilted his head as he sniffed the items, then jerked his head toward the river and barked loudly. Jaden shot up as Bane started downstream. "Come on, let's see what he finds." Jenna sat in the back seat of the red truck, watching as her father and the other officers dashed into the woods. There was silence, except for Jenna's own nervous breathing. She wanted to be out there, helping them look for her brother, but everyone made it clear that she was to stay in the truck. Her chest ached, her body trembling as she tried to swallow the lump in her throat. Jenna looked down at the cassette tape she was fidgeting with, the melody echoing in her mind. It was Fritz's favorite song, the song that he always insisted they take on road trips. Jenna remembered the first time she played it for him, when he was 4. She remembered his heartwarming smile, his joyful laughter, his beautiful twinkling eyes. A caring, playful, cheerful, loving, innocent little boy who just wanted everyone to be happy. In the corner of her eye, Jenna saw her mother approaching the truck. She didn't acknowledge it. She hugged the tape to her chest and cried. Jenna sobbed, tightening her grip on Alice. Alice stroked Jenna's hair, trying not to cry herself. "It's okay, baby. They'll find him." It stayed like that for what felt like forever. Eventually, Alice pulled away from Jenna. "I gotta do some things." As Alice stood up, Jenna's eyes followed her into the red-themed living room. Alice went over to the mantel that hung over the fireplace and paced back and forth as she glanced at the family photos that were atop it. Jenna assumed she must have been looking for a picture to use for missing posters. As Alice walked upstairs, Jenna paced aimlessly in the kitchen. What could she do? "I can't just do nothing." Jenna had the sudden memory of Fritz getting lost at the store. Jenna had stayed close to Alice, but she remembered promising herself that she was going to find Fritz, even if that meant disobeying her mother. Luckily, Fritz was found playing in the toys section of the store. Snapping back to reality, Jenna thought to herself, "But I'll get lost in the woods. I don't know how to navigate them without Mom or Dad." She turned her attention to the green phone that sat next to the sink. "But I know who does." Jenna spoke hurriedly, almost stumbling on her words. "Are you alone?" Michael shook his head, glancing up at Dad. "No." "Well, can we meet somewhere and talk privately? Now?" Michael shrugged, nervousness seeping into his voice. "Sure. Where?" "How about that intersection? You know, the one we always separate at when we're coming home from school?" Michael nodded. "Yeah, I could be there in 10 minutes. Jenna almost rushed all her words together. "Okay, hurry." "Alright." Michael placed the phone back in its place with a ding. Dad looked up from his plate. "Going somewhere?" Michael turned to Dad, who was sitting at the table. "Yeah, she just wants to hang out." Dad's expression turned to concern, probably sensing the fear in Michael. "Is everything okay?" Michael nodded emphatically. "Yeah, everything's okay." Michael dashed toward the door when Dad called, "You didn't eat anything yet, Michael." Michael stopped dead in his tracks, then sighed impatiently. He quickly turned to Dad. "Alright, I'll put something in my backpack." He ran toward his room, calling, "I'll eat when I get there." Near the intersection was a small, neon-fashioned gas station, surrounded by many wooden benches that stood along the sidewalk. At one of the benches, Jenna sat with her face in her hands, her bike leaning against the bench precariously. Michael got off his bike and pulled it along as he approached Jenna. Jenna looked up. We have to go look for him. Michael nodded. Okay, let's go look right now. He turned to the gas station, glancing at the line of phone booths. Let me tell my dad first. Jenna shot up. No! Michael glanced back at Jenna, cringing. Why? Jenna hesitated. She opened her mouth, closed it, then confessed. I'm not allowed to go look for him. Michael stared in shock. What? Why? Jenna spoke so fast, it was hard for Michael to distinguish one word from another. It's protocol in case he was kidnapped. Michael tried to keep his voice as calm as possible. He wasn't kidnapped, Jenna. He's okay. Jenna almost shouted, But it's still the protocol. I can't do anything. Michael hesitated. Well, then let your dad handle it. He took a step closer to Jenna. They'll find Fritz. He'll be okay. Jenna jaw dropped, then clenched her fists. I can't just do nothing. You should understand. You know what it's like to lose a sibling. Michael froze, rage boiling in his gut. He waited for Jenna to apologize. She didn't. She just kept staring at him. Michael took a deep breath, trying hard to keep his voice calm. All right, if they haven't found him by tonight, say 7, then we'll go look for him. Jenna blurted. What? No, we have to go now. What if they catch us looking for him when we're not supposed to be? I really don't care. What good would it do if you're caught and you can't go looking for him because you're locked in your room or something? Jenna opened her mouth, then closed it. Michael slowly walked up to Jenna and gently placed his hands on her shoulders, trying to speak as clearly as possible. If Fritz is not home by 7, give me a call. We'll meet back here and we'll go looking for him. Okay? I promise. And we'll find him. Jenna took a shaky breath, wiping tears from her eyes. Okay. Walking toward his room, Michael froze in the middle of the hallway. He turned to his left and stared blankly. Between Thomas's room and the bathroom was Elizabeth's room. Jenna's voice echoed in Michael's mind. You know what it's like to lose a sibling. Michael never went in Elizabeth's room after she. Michael shook his head and kept walking. As he passed Thomas's room, he flinched to hear, Hey! Michael whirled to see Thomas playing one of his video games. He said, Sorry, didn't mean to scare you. Where have you been? Michael didn't notice he was trembling until he shrugged shakily. I was just hanging out with Jenna. Were you just playing your games? Thomas's smile died. You okay? Michael nodded. Yeah, I'm fine. You know you can talk to me, right? If something's wrong, you can tell me anything. Michael nodded again. Yeah, I know. I'm okay, thanks. Thomas smiled again, but to Michael it looked fake, like he was still apprehensive. Thomas spoke. Alright. He gestured to his television set. You wanna play? Michael beamed. Yeah, just give me a minute. As Michael turned toward his room, Thomas asked with concern in his voice. You're sure everything's okay? Michael walked into his room. Yeah, thanks for asking. After closing the door behind him, Michael walked over to his closet. He stood on his tiptoes and reached over the shelf at the top of the closet. He pulled down his long rifle and a box of ammunition. Dad used to take Michael and Thomas hunting. He never made them shoot an animal, neither did he shoot an animal himself in front of them. But he had always made sure that Michael and Thomas could find an animal and use a weapon. Michael pulled out the magazine, filled it, placed it back in the rifle, then chambered around. The branches snapped under Anthony's feet. His heart hammered, his lungs leaden, his legs aching. He kept running. When the group caught up to Bane, he dashed off again, his bark almost deafening. After what felt like an excruciating eternity, Bane slowed from a run to a trot, and Anthony almost fell forward in an attempt to slow his pace. Bane whirled toward a cluster of foliage. The tall bushes, combined with the dense leaves from the surrounding trees, made the place seem like a natural hedge. Bane barked several more times as he trotted into the thorny bushes. Jaden, Anthony, and the rest of the policemen made their way through the dense foliage. Behind the foliage was a small opening in the woods. Bane was fiercely barking at the nearly perfect rectangle in the ground. It sank almost a foot into the dirt and seemed to be nearly 10 feet long. It was like an oversized grave. Jaden pointed at it. "What the hell is that?" End of chapter 3.